This is the Building Automation Monthly Podcast with Phil Zito, episode 71. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 71 of the Building Automation Monthly Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to give you an overview of the CSI MasterFormat. Now, everything I discussed today can be found at buildingautomationmonthly.com/71. Once again, that is buildingautomationmonthly.com/71. So today's tip is around location and specifically location of sensors. Now, what do I mean by location of sensors? Well, I had two really interesting conversations the other week when I was talking with a counterpart of mine, and we were talking about just, how it seems that HVAC knowledge is a lost art. And he was talking to me about how, all the good engineering schools and things like that used to teach HVAC, but now it just seems to be textbook knowledge, and you're only finding folks with HVAC knowledge out of the trade schools and stuff like that. And I was like, I kind of agree with you, but at the same time, I came out of the Navy and barely knew what a filter was, and then I would like to think that I have a HVAC knowledge now due to my own self-studying that can rival most mechanical engineers. But the point is not that folks aren't learning HVAC or that they're not capable of learning HVAC. It's that the way they're learning HVAC is kind of just not being as effective as it could be. And case in point, we were talking about how we're looking at a rooftop unit that had an outdoor air flow sensor, and it was placed in such a way that it would never get an accurate reading. And then, we started to talk about some pipes and how people put flow sensors right after a 90-degree bend, and we're joking around, don't they know what cavitation is, and how water gets turbulent, and how they're probably just sensing air half the time. And, because a lot of folks don't realize that water in a pipe, yes, you would think the pipe would be full and it would just flow. But, when water under pressure hits these bends, it actually can produce these, for lack of a better word, pockets of air that then go and basically can create air gaps and things like that. Now, I know in an ideal world there'd be no air in the pipe and things like that, but that's just the reality of the world we live in. So today's tip really is that you just understand the impact of where you place sensors. Do you place a humidity sensor right next to a area that might be getting a lot of outdoor air intake and would be giving a false humidity reading after that outdoor air disperses into the space and mixes? Or do you place it kind of further away from the diffusers so that you're getting a better reading? Or do you place a flow sensor like an Onicon water flow sensor? Do you place that right after a 90-degree bend? Or do you do a certain amount of pipe lengths? So you really got to just study up on sensor placement and understand that the impact of where you place your sensor can be very impactful. Yes, I know that was using impact twice, but I wanted to have some impact. So, anyways, here we go. All right, let's get into today's topic. All right, so an overview of CSI MasterFormat. Well, what you may or may not know, depending on how long you've been in the building automation industry and whether you've done installation or service or integration, is that all projects pretty much start with two documents: plans, which we covered in episode 70, and specifications, which we're covering here in episode 71. And specifications, what they are the basically the definition. I would say they're kind of like when you go in and you open up your car manual to figure out how much oil you got to put in your car. And you look and you're like, oh, 5 liters. So, okay, I need to go get 5 liters of oil. Well, that's what a specification is for a building automation system. It kind of defines, all right, this is the way you're going to do things. This is how much of something you're going to do. This is how it's going to be done. A specification provides all of those necessary details that are required for you to properly go and install a building automation project. Now, what happens is that an engineer is going to go and create a specification that is going to define how the project is going to be executed, what parts are going to be used, what sequences are going to be implemented, how warranty, how training, every single little detail you could possibly think of is going to be defined in the specification. Now, there's really two ways you can go about having a specification, and one is, I just mentioned, the engineer can create it. The other is that the actual owner of the building can create it. Now, this is something you'll commonly see at universities and potentially major corporate campuses, but quite often you're going to see kind of the 80-20 rule. 80% of your specifications are going to be from consulting engineers. That 20% is going to be from owners. Now, one of the ways in which specifications are done, are created, are formatted is called CSI MasterFormat. Now, CSI is the Construction Specifications Institute, right? And essentially what it is that it's this institute that I don't know what else they've done other than MasterFormat. I'm sure someone is going to pop on here and be like, well, they do this and this and this. But the only important thing that I've been involved in that they do is MasterFormat. And what a thing MasterFormat is. MasterFormat is, it's like this complicated work of art in that it breaks down almost every possible category of thing you could think of that is going to go into a building, and it breaks it down into a division, or as those of us who have been in the industry a while like to call them divs. And so when you hear folks talk about div 23 or div 25, what they're referencing is the division of which a specific technology or system or set of systems falls in. So for example, div 25,000 is the integrated automation division. And under that, you have a series of subdivisions which break out into greater detail. So for example, 2590, so 25,009, or not even 25,000. I guess it would be, we'll just call it 259000. Because when I think about it, it's not 25,000. It'd be technically be 250,000. But that's not even how anyone would call it. We'd just call it div 25 section 90. And 2590 is the integrated automation control sequences. And what that would do is that would break out different control sequences for different technology sets. I think there's one in there for lighting, one for HVAC, one for energy, for access control, etc. The theory is that you would go and categorize what you want done into the appropriate sections within the divs, and then anyone who got their hands on the specification for that project would be able to turn to that div and would be able to immediately find information pertinent to the topic they're looking on. Now, a div and ultimately the sections, the subdivisions within the divs are going to break out into 3 to 4 sections kind of. And what they are the general, the products, the execution, and sometimes the sequences. Now, what would this look like on a project? Well, what this would look like on a project would be, let's once again go into that integrated automation division 25. And let's say you went under one of the categories, or sorry, one of the sections in there, and you started to dig into it. Typically how it would be broken out, that subdivision would be broken out into 4 kind of sections. And as I mentioned, the first is general. And general is going to really, it's just going to take you through explaining, like, this is the scope of work. This is how meetings are going to run. This is how you're going to do submittals. This is what is expected with submittals. You know, like 2 hard copies plus this and that. And this is how you're going to handle warranty. And this is how warranty hours are going to be handled. It lays out all that information. And that's why when I'm like telling owners all the time, you can't see me like slamming my fist here. I'm like, grr. When I'm like saying to owners, you really need to be involved in the specification. You can't just hand it over to a consulting engineer and say, all right, go, have at it. No, I mean, you need to tell people, what do you want your submittals to look like so you can look them over? What do you want your warranty period to be like? What do you want your training to be like? I mean, this is your chance to go in there and define things. And for those who are, you know, system integrators and controls providers, I mean, really have this passion and have a conversation with your owners and be like, hey, you know, you can put stuff in here. I mean, it's not some, you know, mythological tome handed down from the heavens. And I'm like hitting my mic as I hold my hands up here in the sky. And you receive this tomb handed down to you and you're like, oh, it's so holy, I can't touch the specification. Thou art not worthy. No, I mean, you can go and modify things and change things and make differences. And so for those of you who have owners who aren't satisfied with what's going on, or those of you who own buildings that aren't satisfied with what's going on, take a look at your specifications, read through them, and change what you don't like. It's okay to change what you don't like. I'm telling you, you're not really going to break anything if you go and you change what you don't like. I mean, obviously, if you're going to go and change sequences and stuff like that, you probably want to know what you're doing. But, I mean, we're not talking rocket science here. We're talking heating and air conditioning. And whether you guys like it or not, once you learn that stuff, I think you'd agree, for the average heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, it's not that complicated. Yeah, sure, there are complicated systems that are a little kind of crazy, but the average system is not that difficult. All right, well, I'll pull off my soapbox here. I'm going to pull back to the topic at hand, which is the sections within a div and a subdiv. And you've got general, which I just described. You've got products, and these are like the physical details of your products, and sometimes you'll break them out in physical and software. Sometimes you'll combine the two. But essentially, this is like where you're saying, well, the sensor should have this capability, and the controller should have this capability, should use these comm trunks, should use this thing and that thing. And these are where I tend to realize that folks have been copying the exact same thing for probably 20 years. Because there's a fair amount of specifications in the product section that are like calling out things like ArcNet. And I'm like, all right, BACnet over ArcNet. Yeah, let's go look for a system that does that. I mean, seriously, come on. It's like that stuff is 1980s technology, yet it's still sitting in the spec. I've just changed that stuff. Seriously. I mean, I get copy and paste is your friend, but I mean, you could just do a little bit of effort and change that. But in all seriousness, products is where you're going to go and you're going to find all the physical and software requirements. Now, this is the most underused section of the specification because it's like right here where folks could be like, my graphical user interface looks like this. Like, here's what it should look like. I really got to take my hands out of the air. I'm like whacking my mic. I'm whacking. I'm like, whack, whack. All right. Anyways, in all seriousness, I mean, this is where you can go and you can define your graphical user interface. This is where you can go and say, guess what? We're going to put our alarms in different categories so that we don't have the filter alarm at the same priority as the chiller alarm. I mean, it's like mind blown concepts here that are so obvious to those of us who are out there operating this stuff every day, yet it's not getting put in that specification. It's not getting put in there, and it can be put in there. It's simply just doing it. So that is like another area that really, 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 really needs to be taken advantage of. And finally, execution. So execution is another section within that div that's going to tell you how is the project going to be executed. Are you going to use multicolored wire? Which you really should be. You should be using multicolored wire. I mean, we've all been in these panels that have been there for like 20 years, and it's like a bunch of white wire, and it's not labeled, and it's going everywhere. Oh my gosh, I like have dreams of panels that are orange and red and yellow and all sorts of different colors. And I can go, oh, the orange wire, that means it's an analog output. Or, oh, the blue wire, that's a comm trunk. Or, oh, the red wire, that's power. And yes, I know. In some of you who are electricians are going to be like, Phil, that doesn't match an electrical standard. Okay, I get it. But you know what? Having everything white doesn't match an electrical standard either. Or if it does, I'm not aware of any electrical standard that says everything should be white. But anywho, going and specifying things like this, or like we're not going to put the controller right next to the 480 transformer. I mean, that's a freaking brilliant idea right there, right? Who wants to put on arc flash gear in Dallas, Texas when it's 130 on a roof so that they can open up a unit because someone decided it'd be cheaper to do 480 to 24 volts and have a freaking 480 transformer right next to my BAS controller because it's just cheaper for them to not have to step down from 480 to 120 to 24. So they just skip that and they're like, oh yeah, whatever. I don't know. It's cheaper. It saved me $20. So these are all things that you can put in the specification that are going to make your life so much easier. And finally, there's this like fourth section called sequences. And really what sequences are, guess what? Sequences. They tell you how stuff is going to happen. And this is kind of hit or miss here. Because often what I'll see is I'll see one of two things. And I'd like to say it's a 50-50 split, but I don't really have enough touch points. You know, I haven't looked at hundreds of thousands of specs because there's hundreds of thousands out there. I've definitely looked at thousands of specs, and I would say that probably more the majority of them put the sequence in div 23, which is HVAC, and then they reference it in div 25. However, with that being said, there are some who are putting the specifications in div 25. And you know, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. It's nice to have it all in the same division because then I don't have to be switching pages and hunting and pecking. But I get why they would put it in 23 and then reference it in 25. It's less writing. Because even if it's in 25, it's going to be in 23 anyways, because the guy who's doing startup really should know. Now, let's not get me started on startup and the debate of... So I was talking to my buddy Fernando, and we're like talking about VFDs, and he's being told by this mechanical, like, hey, you need to make sure that the VFD is working. And I'm talking to him, and we're going back and forth. I'm like, nah, you really should only be checking like 4 or 5 wires on the VFD. Like, it's not your responsibility to make sure that it's rotating properly and all sorts of stuff like that. But you get these folks out there, like some of these mechanical outfits that are a little shady. And I'm sure none of you mechanical outfits that are listening to me are like this. But maybe your competition is, or maybe someone else, you know, like your crazy uncle or something. But you get some of these mechanicals that like startup to them is turning on the 480 transformer, and that's it. And it's kind of scary. They don't check rotation of the fan. make sure that the coils aren't plugged and that you're actually getting flow through them, stuff like that. And they'll expect the BAS guys to do all that. And you really got to be careful of that. And this is really hard for folks who are brand new coming into building automation, because they get thrown on an installation project and they got this like guy who's like, "Rah, rah, rah," like all yelling at them and stuff. And then you're sitting there trying to make everyone happy. You're brand new to BAS and they're telling you like, "Well, does the VFD work?" And you're like, "I don't know." And then they're like, "Well, you need to check fan rotation." You don't need to check fan rotation. That's their job to check fan rotation. So anything that is a mechanical dependency of the unit, that really should be mechanical startup. It's the controls pieces that you're going to be concerned about. Like on the VFD, as I mentioned when I was talking to my buddy, we were saying, well, start, stop, speed, status, alarm, and maybe feedback. But, I mean, that's really it. So, anyways, where I was going with this is sequences. I can see why they have them in Div 23. I also think it's good to have them in Div 25 because it just makes stuff more easy. I'll be honest, I'm guilty of this in the past. Of if it wasn't in Div 25 and it was something like a VAV box, I'd be like, yeah, I know how to program a VAV box. And I wouldn't even look at it because it's a VAV box. I mean, come on. It's like, it's open for cooling. It's closed for not cooling. I mean, how much more complex is it going to get? And yeah, I know you've got like these ASHRAE guideline 36P standards out there that are like, well, you're going to close or open the VAV box only to 90%. And that is going to give you greater efficiency because there's no reason for you to hit the full CFM of the VAV box. And I'm like, well, why don't you just balance the VAV box and set the minimum and maximums properly in the first place? And anyways, I won't even get to picking those wonderful things of engineering beauty apart. But with that being said, that's what a specification breaks out to be. Now, what does it look like? Typically, it's a Word document of some sorts, and this Word document or PDF. I try to get the specifications in PDF whenever I can, because if you get a specification in PDF, and no, here's what I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about getting a scanned version of a specification. Do me a favor. Swear, put your hand up as long as you're not driving and say, I swear I will no longer scan the sequence or the specification and send it to people as a scan. I will send them a pure PDF copy. I solemnly swear, or I will send Phil Zito $1,000. Well, maybe you leave that last part off. But in all seriousness, what you're doing when you scan stuff and you send it to people is you're not having it indexed. And there is nothing worse than getting a 4,000-page specification that you can't search. Because when you scan it, the computer has no idea what the words on the page mean. Versus if I send you the original PDF, then I can type in things. I can be like cooling only VAV box and hit find. And then all of a sudden I can find that. So I'm telling you that is like a pro tip. If you do that, you will save people so much time as long as they understand to hit the control key and press the letter F, which, I mean, that's advanced computer usage right there. So I don't know. No, but in all seriousness, that is invaluable. So make sure you're doing that. Make sure you are going and you are not scanning the specifications, but you are actually going and taking the PDF version of the specification and sending that to folks. All right. So there you go, folks. And if some of you were hearing all this talk about standards and all that, and you're wondering, I'm telling you, my new BAS A to Z program, it is a godsend when it comes to standards. One of the bonuses you get is the how to create a BAS standard bonus checklist, and that is going to guide you through how to create your own standard. And there's videos on how to do it. And Also, it's going to cover a lot of the concepts that we've been talking through in these podcast episodes. So you really, really, really should consider picking that up. For the price it's at and the amount of knowledge you're going to gain in just a week going through it, it's like a no-brainer. So you can find out more about that at buildingautomationmonthly.com/71. And everything I covered today also will be at buildingautomationmonthly.com/71. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on specifications. What do you think makes a good spec? What do you think makes a bad spec? What would you wish that specification writers knew when they were writing specifications that would make your life as a BAS professional easier? I'd love to read your comments in the comments section below this podcast recording at buildingautomationmonthly.com/71. And until next time, keep learning, keep pushing, keep getting better day by day, and I'll talk to you again. Take care.